The courtroom went silent the moment my ex-husband smiled. Not because he looked happy, because he looked certain. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered something that made them both laugh. Then he looked across the room at me as if I were already yesterday's news. I didn't smile back. I looked at my son instead. 19-year-old Noah sat outside the courtroom through the glass doors with a court counselor, swinging his feet under a plastic chair. He wasn't playing with the coloring book she'd given him. He just kept glancing toward the closed doors, wondering which parent would walk out first. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter, please be seated. A thick folder landed on the bench. Before we begin, the judge said, the court has received additional evidence overnight. Daniel's smile grew even wider. Mine didn't change. Neither of us knew what was inside. That terrified me. Because after everything I'd survived, I still wasn't sure the truth would be enough. Before I tell you what happened next, I'm curious. What city are you watching from today? I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. 9 years earlier, I woke up staring at a white hospital ceiling. For a few seconds, everything felt peaceful. Then I tried to move. Pain exploded through my hips and legs so suddenly that I screamed before I understood why. A nurse rushed in. Easy, easy, don't move. I looked down. Metal braces surrounded both legs. My left arm was wrapped from shoulder to wrist. Machines beeped beside me. What happened? The nurse hesitated. You've been unconscious for 3 days. The words barely registered, then another thought crashed into my mind. My baby, she smiled softly. He's healthy. I cried harder hearing those 2 words than I had from the pain. My son Noah had been only 3 months old. I hadn't even held him long enough to memorize the weight of his body before I was gone. The accident happened on the drive back from a military rehabilitation training conference. A pickup truck crossed the center line during heavy rain. 3 vehicles collided. 2 people died. I survived, barely. Doctors weren't sure I'd walk normally again. For weeks, my world shrank to the distance between the hospital bed and the parallel bars in physical therapy. 6 feet. Some days I couldn't make it halfway. Every tiny step felt like dragging broken bones through wet concrete. I learned something strange about pain. After enough days, it becomes ordinary. You stop asking when it'll end. You just hope tomorrow hurts a little less than today. Daniel visited almost every evening during that first month. He brought flowers. He kissed my forehead. He told everyone I was the strongest woman he'd ever known. Looking back, I think he was practicing being the perfect husband while deciding how to leave. The changes were tiny at first. He answered texts while I talked. He stopped asking how therapy went. He complained about hospital parking. Then one afternoon he didn't visit at all. The next day he apologized. Work's been crazy. I believed him. A week later he missed another day. Then another. Soon the nurses stopped asking if my husband was coming. They simply pulled up an extra chair whenever my best friend Melissa arrived instead. She never made excuses. She just showed up. One rainy afternoon I finally stood without anyone holding me. 5 seconds, that was all. The therapist clapped, Melissa cried. I laughed. It felt like maybe life was beginning again. An hour later, Daniel walked into my room carrying a leather folder. He didn't hug me. Didn't ask about therapy, didn't notice I'd taken my first steps as he laid the folder on my blanket. I think this is best. I frowned. What is? Our divorce. I actually laughed at ridiculous, then I realized he wasn't joking. My hands started shaking. Daniel, I can't do this anymore. Do what? This. He motioned toward my wheelchair, toward my braces, toward me. I didn't expect my life to become. He searched for the word. This. I stared at him. We've been married 11 years. I know. You have a 3-month-old son. I know. You promised. I promised forever, he interrupted quietly. I didn't know forever would look like hospitals. Those words broke something inside me that the accident never whispered, Is there someone else? Silence. That was my answer. Melissa walked in carrying coffee. She saw the papers, then looked at Daniel. Get out. He didn't move. I said. She stepped closer. Get out. For the first time since we'd met, Daniel looked afraid. Not of me. Of her. He picked up his coat and left without another word. Melissa sat beside me. She didn't say everything will be okay. She knew better. Instead, she held my hand while I cried until visiting hours ended. 2 weeks later, I was discharged. Melissa drove me home. As we pulled into my driveway, there was a silver SUV parked outside. I didn't recognize it. Daniel opened the front door before we reached it. Behind him stood a woman about my age wearing one of my sweaters. She froze. So did I. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "This is Ava." She gave an awkward smile. "I've heard a lot about you." I looked at my sweater, then at Daniel. "How long?" Nobody answered. "How?" I asked again. "Long?" Ava looked away. Daniel finally said, "Almost a year." My knees gave out, not from the injuries, from the truth. He'd started another relationship while I was still pregnant. Melissa caught me before I hit the ground. She looked at Daniel with a calmness that scared even me. "One day," she said quietly, "you're going to need compassion from someone." Daniel frowned. I hope they remember this day. Those words stayed with me for years. Not because they sounded dramatic, because they turned out to be true. The divorce happened faster than I expected. Daniel wanted primary custody. His attorney argued that I couldn't physically care for an infant. The judge refused. Instead, she ordered shared custody while I completed rehabilitation. Daniel walked out furious. That wasn't the end, it was the beginning. For the next 9 years, every birthday, every school event, every doctor's appointment became another battle. Daniel questioned every decision I made. If Noah had a scraped knee after riding his bike, Daniel accused me of negligence. If Noah got an A on a science project, Daniel told everyone it was because he'd paid for tutoring. He didn't just want to be the better parent. He needed everyone else to believe I was the worse one. I stopped arguing. Instead, I kept records, every email, every missed pickup, every text, every school report, every medical appointment, not because I planned to use them. Because I had learned that memories fade, paper doesn't. 9 years passed. Noah grew into a thoughtful boy who loved astronomy and asked impossible questions at bedtime. Life wasn't easy, but it was peaceful. Then, 3 months before his 10th birthday, a courier knocked on my front door. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a petition from Daniel. He wasn't asking for more visitation. He wanted sole custody. His reason was only one sentence long. New evidence has come to light proving Mrs. Carter concealed information material to previous custody proceedings. I read that sentence 3 times, then my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in nearly a decade. When I answered, a calm voice said only 7 words. "Don't trust anyone from your old unit." The line went dead. The anonymous call echoed in my head long after the line went dead. "Don't trust anyone from your old unit." I called the number back. Disconnected, no voicemail, no name. Just silence. I stared at the phone until Noah walked into the kitchen carrying his backpack. "Everything okay, Mom?" I forced a smile. "It will be." He studied my face for a second. He had Daniel's eyes, but thankfully, he had my instincts. "When you say it will be," he said quietly, "that usually means it isn't." I laughed despite myself. "I'll tell you when I can." He nodded. "I trust you." Those 3 words reminded me exactly what was at stake. My attorney, Rebecca Lawson, had spent 25 years handling difficult custody cases. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't loud. She listened. After reading Daniel's petition, she closed the folder. "This isn't about custody." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She tapped the first page. "People who want custody talk about children." She pointed lower. "Your ex talks about your military history." Then she looked directly at me. "Someone wants to destroy your credibility. Not your parenting. Your credibility." That changed everything. Over the next 2 weeks, we started digging. Daniel claimed a former member of my military support unit had contacted him. According to his filing, that person said I had hidden serious misconduct. Rebecca wasn't interested in rumors. She wanted names, dates, evidence. There wasn't much. Just anonymous statements, copies instead of originals. Missing signatures. The deeper we looked, the stranger it became. Then came the first real surprise. Daniel wasn't paying for the lawsuit. His financial records, obtained through discovery, showed he couldn't afford it. Yet he had hired one of the most expensive family law firms in the state. Rebecca leaned back. "Someone else is paying." But who? She smiled. That's exactly the question. A week later, we had our answer. A subpoena uncovered payments from a private family foundation connected to Ava's uncle. He wasn't just wealthy. He owned several assisted living facilities and had recently announced a campaign for state office. His advisors believed a perfect family image would help his public reputation. Daniel had been promised a senior executive position in the company. One condition: he had to relocate. The problem? He couldn't move out of state while sharing custody with me. He didn't want Noah. He wanted permission to leave. For 9 years he had acted like fatherhood was an inconvenience, unspitzens. Now my son had become a business requirement. When Rebecca explained it, I felt strangely calm. Not because it hurt less, because it finally made sense. The hearing began 3 weeks later. Daniel looked exactly like the man I'd married. Confident, well-dressed, charming. If someone had walked into that courtroom without knowing either of us, they probably would have believed him. That frightened me more than anything, because lies often wear expensive suits. His attorney opened first. She spoke for nearly an hour. She praised Daniel's career, his stability, his home, his commitment to Noah. Then she turned toward me. She suggested I had deliberately hidden portions of my military records. She questioned whether my injuries had affected my judgment. Every sentence sounded reasonable. Every sentence left out something important. That's how good lawyers work. They don't always lie. Sometimes they simply remove the truth. Then Daniel testified. He sounded calm. I've always wanted what's best for my son. Rebecca wrote something on her legal pad. She slid it toward me. Count his lies. I stopped after 12. Then came the moment I never expected. Daniel looked directly at me. I stayed with her through the hardest part. He paused, but eventually she pushed everyone away. My heart pounded, not because it was true, because I suddenly understood something. He had repeated that story so many times, he actually believed it. Rebecca stood. Mr. Carter, she smiled politely. You testified that you remained at your wife's side during rehabilitation. Yes? She nodded. You visited almost every day? That's correct. No further clarification? No. Rebecca walked toward the evidence screen. Let's review the hospital visitor log. The screen lit up. Date after date appeared. Visitors were listed by name. Melissa, Grace, nurses, therapists. Daniel, 5 visits. Total, 5, not 40, not 30, 5. The courtroom became silent. Rebecca waited. Were hospital employees lying? No. So these records are accurate? Daniel swallowed. I may have forgotten. Rebecca nodded. It seems you've forgotten quite a lot. That was only the beginning. School attendance records showed he had missed more parent conferences than I had. Medical records showed I attended every specialist appointment. Canalder entries matched emails. Receipts matched photographs. 9 years of careful documentation began fitting together like puzzle pieces. I hadn't created a trap. I had simply lived honestly. Daniel grew impatient. His answers became shorter, sharper. His confidence disappeared. Then Rebecca asked one question. The private investigator you hired. Daniel froze. I didn't hire one. Rebecca clicked a remote. A signed contract appeared. His signature, his initials, his payment authorization. He stared at the screen, then at his attorney. She looked genuinely shocked. You told me that contract didn't exist. Daniel said nothing. For the first time, his own lawyer looked angry. The investigator testified next. He admitted Daniel instructed him to find anything that would make a judge question her. Not the truth, anything. He contacted former military colleagues, former neighbors, old co-workers. If someone refused to speak, he kept calling. The judge's expression hardened. Then came the second twist. Ava asked to testify. No one expected it, not even Daniel. She walked slowly to the witness stand. She looked exhausted. I need to correct something, Daniel whispered. Ava, she ignored him. I believed everything Daniel told me. Her voice trembled. He said she abandoned the marriage. He said she refused help. He said she didn't want Noah. She looked toward me. I found his old phone while packing for our move. The courtroom became perfectly still. There were messages. She took a breath. They were dated while Mrs. Carter was still pregnant. Rebecca stepped closer. Messages with whom? With me. She closed her eyes. He told me his marriage had already ended. It hadn't. Daniel buried his face in his hands, Ava continued. I also found messages where he joked that the accident solved the difficult part because now everyone would feel sorry for him. Several people in the gallery gasped. I felt sick, not surprised. Just sick. Daniel suddenly stood. That's out of context. The judge's voice cut through the courtroom. Sit down. Instead, he shouted. She's turning everyone against me. No one answered, because no one needed to. He was doing it himself. After a brief recess, the judge returned with her written findings. She spoke slowly. So there is no misunderstanding. She found no evidence that I had concealed information relevant to custody. She found substantial evidence that Daniel had attempted to manufacture doubt through misleading statements and improperly gathered information. She criticized his pattern of dishonesty under oath. She noted that the court's concern was not perfection, it was trust. And Daniel had destroyed his own. His petition for sole custody was denied. He was ordered to pay my legal fees. The judge also modified the parenting arrangement to better protect Noah from ongoing conflict, explaining that repeated litigation without legitimate grounds was harming the child more than helping him. Daniel didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. Outside, the courthouse reporters waited. One asked Daniel, "Do you have any comment?" He kept walking. Another asked Ava. She simply said, "I should have asked more questions years ago." Then she left. No cameras followed me. I was grateful. Not every victory needs an audience. Noah was waiting on the courthouse steps. He searched my face. I smiled. That was enough. He ran toward me. "So," he asked, "can we go home now?" I laughed. "Yes." We walked to the car together. Halfway there, he slipped his hand into mine. He hadn't done that in years. Children stop holding your hand as they grow. That afternoon, he reached for it on his own. The following spring, Noah entered a school essay contest. The topic's simple. Who is the strongest person you know? I expected him to write about an astronaut or a firefighter. Instead, he wrote about me. At the awards ceremony, he stood behind a small podium, looked out at the audience, and read one sentence I'll carry for the rest of my life. My mom taught me that courage isn't never falling down. Courage is getting back up without becoming someone cruel. I cried before he finished reading. Not because we had won the court case, because after everything, Daniel hadn't taken away the one thing that mattered most. My son's heart. Years ago, I thought justice meant watching the people who hurt you suffer. Now I know better. Justice is waking up one morning and realizing they no longer control your life. The accident nearly took my ability to walk. The divorce nearly took my confidence. The custody battle nearly took my peace. But none of them took the woman I fought to become. And that woman was stronger than the one who walked into the hospital all those years ago. Sometimes people ask whether I ever forgave Daniel. I tell them forgiveness and trust are two different things. I let go of the anger. I never handed him the keys to my life again. If you had been sitting in that courtroom, do you think people like Daniel ever truly change? Or do they only change when they finally face the consequences of their own choices?